Nigerian pilot, tragedy in Taraba, sadly, as boat carrying over 100 passengers capsized mid-water at Benue River. Traders, women, children heading to Benari town on ill-fated boat, and that's on page 8.
This one boat tragedy too many. All right, we'll look at the leadership newspaper. Nigeria loses billions of naira to 70 Lagos-Abidjan checkpoints. And then again, federal government Labour meet on palliative today. Depletion of justices, CJN moves to fill 11 Supreme Court vacancies. That's on page 4 of the paper.
This Nigeria, well, subsidy. Labour threatens a boycott meeting with federal government if meeting Minister Lalong attends. Union accuses minister of supporting a legal faction of NURTW. Plans protest in Imo over workers' sack. Unpaid salaries as court stops action. PNID, Nigeria would have lost 1/3 of its foreign reserves, says Buhari.
The Daily Asset, Tinubu to German Chancellor, Nigeria's narrative will change. Promises to receive over 12,000 asylum seekers. Tinubu others pay tribute as Ohinoye is laid to rest.
The Authority, why INEC destroyed 2.4 million ballot papers 2 weeks to election in Imo. The electoral umpire confused over pending appeal in Bayelsa. Nigerians blame electoral laws for such confusion. And then you also see Missile Mask secures international passports set to travel abroad for studies on page 5.
Wow. All right, the Daily Times, a showdown looms as the NLC Uzodinma lock horns on Wednesday will hold him responsible if anything happens. Government uses fierce coercion on state labor leaders, it says. And then show judgments, confusion grips Oyo over conflicting verdicts from same judge.
Nigerian Express looks at Bode Judge Rekan, says he didn't really mean to leave Nigeria if Tinubu became president. And then you also look at that story. Police arrest medical doctor with 3 children abducted from Benue, and Jigawa's shocking reality. 1 doctor to 21,000 patients, NMA.
All right, the federal government are yet to pay 79.3 billion naira peculiar allowance 7 months after Justin ultimatum ends tomorrow. Supplementary budget stalls payment in agencies. You have that on page 4 of the Daily Trust. Prime Minister yet to give policy directive after 2 months in office.
New Telegraph, Government of National Unity, opposition's conduct after Supreme Court verdict to determine Tinubu's decision. Marafa, APC's petition to NBA confirmation of planned intimidation, harassment of our leaders, and that's coming from LP. Legislative oversight functions can't wait without adequate funding. NILDS DG speaks there.
Let's check out the blueprint now. How I fought a PNID fraud saved Nigeria $15 billion trauma. That's coming from the immediate past. President Buhari says it's an attempted heist on historic proportions, page 6. And then you have SERAP to INEC, take over constitutional reform process or face legal action. Nigerian politicians reluctant to work for genuine improvement on page 6 of the paper.
The Nigerian Tribune looks at 15-point MOU implementation. NLC threatens boycott of meeting with federal government to shut down economic activities in Imo November 1 over alleged labor maltreatment. I directed Kieri Malami to fight $15 billion payment to PNID. Buhari says that had Nigeria lost, it would have required schools not to be built, nurses not to be trained, roads not to be repaired. Accuses ex-British Minister Patel of demanding payment on page 5.
And this day newspaper, 15-point agreement. NLC wants Minister of Labour excluded from today's meeting with federal government. Insists Wednesday's protest at Imo will hold. Tinubu, we're set to change narrative surrounding Nigeria's economy, reiterates with Supreme Court affirmation of his election. No more distractions.
National economy free fall, why Nigeria may continue to depreciate, experts. And bottom page, implication of CBN's lifting of restrictions on 43 items.
All right. You also have other issues there. Beverage tax in Nigeria is thirst for health and revenue. And that's that last paper we're reviewing this morning. So we're getting our review now for analysis. Let me thank you for your patience. So we saw so many stories on the papers today. Should we begin with this human angle? Tragedy in Taraba, quite sad. Only a few days ago, there was also, a boat mishap in Bayelsa State, which claimed one of our own, right here. And here we're having another tragedy for a Monday morning story. That's quite sad, isn't it?
Yes, I saw that story last night, and it was, I don't know. That night when I was going through the story, I fortunately chanced on an interview being conducted by another station with the head of Nigerian Inland Waterways. And there's really a problem, a systemic problem that begins from the headship to the lowest rung. And I say, for instance, the Nigerian Inland Waterways, when I listened to the head of the place yesterday, he didn't seem to have a good grasp of what was going on. He just kept talking about Lagos and how they were doing a lot of enlightenment, a lot of public enlightenment, a lot of training for minders of boats in Lagos waterways without, referring to any other part and saying that the efforts in Lagos is yielding positive results because the incidents in Lagos is really, very limited as unlike before. But to respond to the tragedies across other parts of Nigeria, for instance, in Niger, we've been getting one story too many of both mishaps. In Bayelsa,
even one yes,
even in Kwara.
This year or thereabouts.
Excuse me. So, I think that the inland waterways are not being very well policed, and whatever training is being done in Lagos is supposed to trickle down to other parts of the country. Lagos is not the only part in Nigeria that deserves to get this kind of training. However, we still need to also talk about passengers who actually bought these boats. No matter how anxious you are to get to your next destination, passengers must know that they have a right to insist on life jackets. At least life jackets give you some measure of chance of survival before rescue if you are in a boat and it capsizes. How can we lose the 100 people?
Women and children.
Yes.
Mostly.
And there should be standards. Who are the owners of these boats? Because apart from the person who is captaining the boat, there are the owners. What safety measures do they enforce? For instance, basics. Everybody, it's just like motorbikes. Motorbikes, before it was even banned totally in the city center in Abuja, the policy that you must wear an helmet and your passenger must wear an helmet for you to be able to ride was there. Yes, enforcement remains a major issue. So we really need to have policing of our waterways besides the enlightenment, because people just get so Pentecostal and say, "No worry, we'll go reach." The 100 people who found themselves in a capsized boat will naturally be Pentecostal, not bothering about whether they take the safety measure seriously.
They're talking about the affordability as well, yes, and the cheap.
What's their alternative if they do not board the boats? How else do they get to their destination? Unfortunately, this is another tragedy, and it's happened repeatedly. The recurrence should disturb even government. So I think that government must put its acts together. The Nigerian Inland Waterways boss yesterday wasn't impressive. He didn't cover himself in glory at all because he forgot about Nigeria entirely, and they have just been working in Lagos. And this is a concern. And we're having so much tragedy. And, you link this also to what goes on in the medical field. A newspaper
One doctor
reported
to 21,000
one
patients.
doctor to 21,000
in Taraba,
patients.
in Jigawa State, I beg your pardon.
Look, I have lots of friends who are medical doctors, and they cannot breathe. They cannot breathe because the cases that come to them in a day, one doctor attending to so many cases. Look, there is no way diminishing return will set in, and that accounts for why a lot of times you find both the doctors, the nurses, you find that wrong diagnosis because the person is tired, is brain tired, is exhausted, and so he's not even able to concentrate when the patient is before him, talking to him. They are humans too. They are not machines. They are not robots. So it's disturbing. Now Taraba is able to come out with statistics. We need to be a people who really genuinely conduct studies and do researches and have data to work with. How many doctors do we have, even in the FCT? My friends who are in the FCT who are doctors, look, they don't even have 3-4 hours of rest time for themselves. And the meaning is that we've seen where patients have been given wrong medication. We've seen where patients, somebody who is diabetic ends up being given glucose on his sick bed. What was meant for another patient, they give to him, and he dies. And we've seen one case is too many. And therefore, we need to have the Nigerian government, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Health. We have the current Minister of Health, a lot of rhetorics coming out from there. But what concrete step has been taken to improve the Nigerian healthcare system? People are dying in droves. You will not believe how difficult it is. We are not collating statistics. More Nigerians are dying now of malaria because even to treat malaria now, even in a government hospital, it's not affordable.
All right, let's look at some politics here. Of course, with the off-cycle elections coming closer, we talk about the authority headline story. We said why INEC destroyed 2.4 million ballot papers 2 weeks to election in Imo. Well, the writers say to us, if we can go to authority newspaper, the electoral umpire confused over pending appeal in Bayelsa as a writer there. Nigerians blame electoral laws for such confusion. This is as a result. You see that they've already printed ballot papers and then, of course, went ahead to destroy it. 2.4 million ballot papers.
Who bears the brunt? We're talking about a nation where the citizens are groping in abject poverty, trying to survive, and yet we're spending so much on politics and politicking in the name of wanting to enthrone democracy that the citizens hardly have the dividends. Now, it's really, really disturbing. And part of this whole shenanigan going on is because of the rule too of the judiciary. The courts have become so meddlesome that the courts are the ones who will even determine almost anything. These things are clear that until that is resolved, and there must be, I think we need to tinker with the Electoral Act again, that all of this so drama about who should be candidate, who should not, these things should be resolved way ahead of any elections. 2 weeks to time, you destroy ballot paper. Because some candidates, you have, for instance, even the Rivers matter, where Timi Pre-Silva is struggling to see how he can return to the ballot. That's a major situation. So whatever happens, if eventually he finds a judicial intervention that returns him there, we will still also have the same problem of ballot papers.
I think that's what the writer is even referring to. Confused.
So we must say again that INEC is helpless in this situation. Helpless because the courts, the politicians, in their desperation and within their rights too, if they feel that they've been shortchanged, they must go to court. Now, at that stage, you are now going to ask the judiciary itself, the courts, the judges, to be above board like Caesar's wife. Because we've seen that the recently retired Justice of the Supreme Court, Mohammed Datijo, who, even declined being on the election, on the appeal panel of this presidential election petition, came out in a very, no holds barred valedictory speech, talked about the level of corruption in the judiciary. Absolutely. Now that is, judges naturally are given to taciturnity. Judges do not speak. Yes, it's retiring. Even at that, by their training, they hardly will be found speaking at all. For him to have expressed this amount of concern tells you how really sickening the judiciary has become. Because in the judiciary, still the judiciary that decided to bring 2 cases of 2 prominent Nigerians, one former Senate president, one now current Senate president, who were not on the ballot to have ran for senatorial primaries. Yes. They were not on the ballot. They were even running for presidential primaries. And yet, the courts, in decisions, 2 decisions that the courts, the justices cannot explain it away. And that's those major decisions for Ahmed Lawan and Senator Godswill Akpabio are decisions that have really gone as evidence of how meddlesome and questionable the judiciary and the courts have become.
And may haunt our electoral process for a long time to come.
It will continually haunt us, because anybody who has the means will not be... Look, this is a constitutional democracy. And under a constitutional democracy, you should never become a representative of the people without being on the ballot.
I mean, you look at APC being named to appeal tribunal judgment affirming Governor Fintri's election. So we also know the case scenarios that played out in that election.
And the INEC, the REC, who decided to go announce in what was a civilian coup, announce Binani as winner, approached the court during I think on Friday, to ask the court to stop his prosecution for such a democratic coup that it tries to pull. We are so brazen as a people that somebody who has committed has no contrition, is not contrite, is not broken, is not even sickened by the fact that his family, his friends, his children witnessed him commit that kind of harakiri, and will go to court. And interestingly, it is in this court too that a former governor got the help of his wife, who is now a retired justice of the Supreme Court, and they had, they were granted perpetual injunction from being ever arrested. How can you be governor for 8 years and not be subject to accountability? It is only the judiciary. Nigerian judiciary is so specialized in giving cover, because nobody can explain it. Nothing can justify an order of perpetual injunction stopping a governor who spent 8 years in office from accountability. He cannot be arrested. He cannot be investigated. And since the guy left, nothing has been done, because there is where on earth do you give perpetual injunction? So, and people will begin to turn into politics when concerned citizens come out and say all eyes on the judiciary, and you are catching cold. It's only an old woman who gets scared when broken bones are mentioned in the proverb. A clear conscience fears no accusation. Why should the judiciary feel harassed if the judiciary is up to its name as the last hope of the common man, as the bastion, the umpire, the unbiased umpire? Why should they feel threatened or disturbed? But because the judiciary has become even more political than even politicians, pandering to the whims and caprices of politicians, granting perpetual injunctions to restrain government and the stakeholders from calling for accountability. We need a purge of the judicial system. Yes. We say we have only 11 Supreme Court, 10 Supreme Court justices. The Chief Justice of Nigeria is working on getting 11 more. But even him must have introspection. He must go back and think, because he was called out last week. And I think our constitution makes this, not just the constitution, even the system itself, the structure, how we operate, celebrates strong men, not strong institutions, and we must.
So you have. I mean, you also spoke about the the power of the CJN being too much for one man. I mean, he said the CJN is chairman of the National Judicial Council, which oversees both appointment and discipline of judges. He's equally the chair of Federal Judicial Service Commission, the National Judicial Institute, the Legal Practitioners Privileges Committee that appoints senior advocates of Nigeria. So you have one man wearing all those caps. Yeah. And, people would wonder, how will there not be corruption?
It's just so sad. It's just so sad. It's just like the powers of the president, too. There's been the argument that the president shouldn't be the one determining who becomes INEC chairman, okay? These are questions. If you go by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, the Nigerian president, there is no president in the world as powerful as the Nigerian president, based on the Constitution, because so much has been given to him. And unfortunately, if you give powers to people, they ought to exercise that power with a lot of sense of responsibility. We have an appointment of an INEC commissioner now, in Akwa Ibom, Etekama Umoren, who has always been a card-carrying member of APC. He's been appointed as INEC chairman, INEC electoral commissioner as we speak. A card-carrying member. We thought Buhari was a disaster. He now partisanly appointed commissioners in INEC. But we're having Tinubu also surprise us, because Tinubu before now, as governor of Lagos State, had distinguished himself as a detribalized Nigerian, as a Nigerian who is a patriot. We saw how much he did in Nadeko. But how can Tinubu sit now and begin to want to raise the bar of the shenanigan that Buhari did in appointing a Tekamba Umoren as a resident electoral commissioner, a man who was chief of staff to Akpabio from 2015 to 2019, a man who is even still there with Akpabio as we speak? How can you do that when INEC officials are supposed to be non-partisan? The pictures of him, everything is well documented as a party man. That is one trouble. So if the head is bad and rotten, it will affect every other thing. So the Chief Justice of Nigeria also gets his strength from abuse of power that we see from even Tinubu, because you have a CJN who will not even take, it's just first among equal. It will not take briefing or advisory from colleagues. His
power is final.
Yes, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And this is disturbing. And recently when judges were appointed, they say the CJN has appointed his son. His son is a career judge. So ordinarily, if we are in a country where people operate above board, there's nothing that stops a young man who has grown, who has demonstrated capacity to become anything he wants to be in the judicial system. But because we're people that are given to cronyism, the ICPC law forbids favoritism and all that, but this is what we get everywhere. So we need to, but who will do it? If you are talking about who will amend the laws, you have the politicians who are busy shouting that the masses should tighten their belts, should adjust, should be patient, buying 160 million naira SUV for each of them. So how can we be a people that have lost our humanity so badly that they are just concerned about themselves? Just a few people. In saying this, as much as I have been documented to say Buhari's leadership was the most incompetent, as always, nobody will beat it, I have to still commend Buhari because of the judgment of P&ID, because he fought not to pay that money. He had the courage to go on arbitration. And today, Nigeria has been saved monumental money. So as much as I am not a fan of Buhari, and I still say till tomorrow that he remains the most tribalized, the most ethnocentric, the most incompetent leader Nigeria has produced. I commend him for saving Nigeria.
He also
There's something to commend him about. Okay, so let me, of course, you've almost dealt with all the stories on the papers this morning because one links to with the other and all of that. But let's look at the NLC issue and both the one happening in Imo State, the stoppage, from the court for any form of protest by NLC, and then we put it together with the one at the national level that they are saying even the meeting with the government today over palliative or not, whether the government has yielded or delivered on its promises. The papers are saying that they don't want the Labour minister in that meeting.
Yes.
And one will be wondering why, really, if you're talking about Labour matters and the Labour issues, and you don't want the Labour minister there.
This is laughable, but let's say for the Imo State, no court of the land can legitimately stop the constitutionally given right of the people to assemble and to protest, which is to express themselves.
But one court just did.
We are saying that that is well out of reach. You cannot beat a child and stop the child from crying. That's the law of nature. Except I do not have details of how the court reached that decision. However, if that decision is predicated on the Constitution, which gives a right to people to peaceful assembly and to power to express themselves freely, then I would say that that decision is an aberration. It seeks to breach the right of citizens to protest. And I think that Labour can appeal it.
In that document, the court was there, the judge was even saying, really, there are consequences if you dare. If you dare.
Yes, it tells you when a judge goes preemptively into even his duty, for instance, to show that he's doing it fairly and without bias, his duty is to just make a pronouncement, not to go further to even threaten. So it tells you that some extra politicking has been done. That is my humble opinion. Now, when it comes to the Labour at the national level, like I've always said, I sympathize with Labour. I sympathize with Labour because how do we as a people wait for how many? What's the force of the NLC? We are citizens. The Labour Ajero is not more Nigerian than you and I. When the Arab Spring occurred, they didn't need a labor union to come together. If we are vexed enough, we are hungry enough, we are dying enough, and we are concerned about our conditions,
all right,
then we will not need us to get an Ajero to protest. Nigerians can come out and express themselves, dissatisfaction, peacefully, without destroying anything. It's a constitutionally guaranteed right that not even the Supreme Court has a right to take away from the people.
All right, we'll definitely want to thank you for coming this morning. There's a lot to talk about, including the fact that there may be an increase in fuel pump price, 800 naira. That was mentioned in one of the papers. But we do have the delight to thank you this morning and wish you well this week ahead of all your endeavors. But just before we go, we do have a matter breaking out in Port Harcourt State Assembly, and there are ongoing conversation now. A reporter is there to tell us live what the proceedings are and what the breaking story would be from there. Good morning.
Major, right? If you can hear us, we would like to find out exactly that report about a fire incident in the Port Harcourt, in the Rivers Assembly complex. Could you lead us into what exactly transpired and what's the situation at the moment? Can you hear me? Okay, maybe we need to take a break and see if we can reconnect with our correspondent in Rivers State, who will be telling us what the situation is at the moment. The report reaching us says that there has been a fire outbreak at the State Assembly there in Rivers State. So he will be telling us exactly what the situation is at the moment when we return from this break.